Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Thursday to you. Summer solstice, our longest day of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere. The days start getting shorter after today as we descend towards winter, but we won't talk about that anytime soon. We've got tropical activity. Things are getting very busy here in the Gulf and the Western Atlantic. We're going to chat about that. Also, take a look at the heat across the central and eastern U.S. As well as severe weather potential here. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. Areas that we're watching right now in the tropics, Tropical Storm Alberto making landfall here near Tampico, Mexico. That will be weakening as it moves inland today and should dissipate overnight tonight. But behind it, a new potential storm as we head to the weekend and the first part of next week, following kind of in the footsteps of Alberto. We do have an invest that will be sending moisture into northern Florida, southern Georgia here. That is expected to move in here later in the day tomorrow. We could see locally gusty winds, and there's a small chance this still has the opportunity to strengthen into a depression or a storm. But it's a small system and surrounded by dry air, so the odds are not super great for that to happen. Behind that, things are going to stay active next week. We've got more tropical moisture moving in. At this point, nothing defined, but something that we'll be watching over the coming days. Here's a look at our map, and you can see everything close to land. Right now, Tropical Storm Alberto, winds are 50 miles per hour and accelerating westward. It will dissipate in the mountains of Mexico tonight, but still some heavy rain expected through the day today. Behind it, we've got an orange area that has a 50% chance of becoming a tropical depression or maybe even a storm when it moves into the same exact area that Alberto formed yesterday morning. It has not quite formed yet, but is expected to form and cross the Yucatan and reappear across the southwestern Gulf, where it's got the opportunity to develop once again and follow a similar path. And then we've got this disturbance, 92L, or AL92, which is small, just east of the northern Bahamas, and not a lot of thunderstorm activity, but still has a chance of flying under the radar and becoming a depression, about a 30% chance right now, as that heads towards the Florida-Georgia line here early tomorrow. Here's a larger view of the tropics. Excuse me, catching my breath here. And you can see lots of activity now over the Western Gulf and the Caribbean. We still have a big gyre in here. It has shifted westward. The first piece is Alberto right here. The second piece is going to come around and follow the same track here as we get through the weekend. And then we've got a large upper level low here, which is drawing this moisture back to the west across Cuba and southern Florida. On the northern end of that upper low, we've got our circulation here, and that is heading quickly towards northern Florida. On the southern end of it, we've got moisture feeding across Jamaica, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico today. The rest of the Atlantic, pretty quiet for the time being, and that is to be expected this time of the year, but you can see another wave coming here off of Africa. Here's a closer look at the Caribbean. Here's our infrared. You can see the center right now of Alberto moving inland, and it will be losing its identity by this time tomorrow. Lots of rain again across the eastern Pacific and especially across Central America, where flooding continues to be a problem. I don't know what the death toll is, but I've seen it has been climbing, unfortunately, in the mountainous areas here of Central America, where the rain has just been relentless over the last week. You can see here is our upper level low system here that is on the map now. And that is drawing the tail end of our front westward here, and this is why we've got our disturbed area, and it's also drawing this moisture here into Hispaniola. And then we've got to keep an eye on the southern Caribbean as well for heavy rainfall, not for tropical organization for the time being. Here's a look at our system east of Florida. That's really the only thing to worry about in the open Atlantic for the time being. That is going to race westward here. It looks pretty sloppy on satellite because it is. The rest of the central Atlantic is in pretty good shape. Just a few weak tropical waves moving around the around the 10 north latitude, but nothing that looks like it's going to form. And a big wave coming off of Africa, but this one is already starting to fade as it hits the more stable air in place over the eastern Atlantic. Here's a look at where the model takes our system here to the north and east of the Bahamas. This is this morning, and you can see the NAM zips it along quickly, never really organizes it too much, and then takes that circulation onshore here tomorrow morning between Daytona Beach and Ponte Vedra Beach, probably near St. Augustine. Time frame on that's going to be around lunchtime tomorrow. The moisture will wring itself out over northern Florida and Georgia. This is not going to be a situation where we deal with the same thing as we did in Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi with the coastal flooding. In fact, it'll just kick up the surf. It'll bring a few hours of locally heavy rain to some places. The severe threat's not going to be there. Just going to pick up the wind a little bit and pick up the moisture a little bit as well. But not a lot to write home about. Now, let's take a look at Alberto real quick, and then we'll get back to that system. The center is right in here. It is certainly consolidated since yesterday, but by the time it got its act together, it was already getting ready to make landfall. So we do have some areas that we have to watch for heavy rain and severe weather this morning across parts of South Texas. Not deep South Texas, but west of Corpus Christi and south of San Antonio. That area has got to be watched for heavy rain and thunderstorm activity. The good news is that we do see winds lightening up here coming off of the Gulf, so our surf is cutting down now across Texas. The last couple of days has been very rough across this area. We've seen some coastal flooding. That is going to let up, and there's actually a pocket of drier air that's in place temporarily for a couple of days that will circulate west. So East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama are all going to have a drier day today until this upper low here in the southeastern Gulf brings yet another surge of moisture in for the weekend. Well, really starting tomorrow, but towards the weekend as well. So here's Alberto, landfall being made now. I don't have a new advisory, but 50-mile-per-hour wind. Large area of wind, but very disorganized, and this has shrunk since yesterday as it's consolidated due to the convergence of the coastline, taking the wind and basically contracting it to near the center. And by this afternoon, a depression. By tonight, it will dissipate. Just some moisture moving west through Africa. All right, so let's talk about 92L, and we're just starting to see the visible satellite on it, but the center is actually in here, near 75 west, near 27 north. Most of the thunderstorm activity very disheveled. You kind of see this arc band here well to the east of the center, and then you see a little bit of thunderstorm activity north of it. It's really not much to write home about. I find it difficult to believe this will become a named storm, but the winds are strong enough in these thunderstorms for it to, if they start to sustain themselves closer to the center, for us to get something that rallies at the very end to steal a name. The next name on the list is Beryl, B-E-R-Y-L. This will be mostly good news for northern Florida as it sends moisture into an area that needs that rain. I don't think we're going to see severe weather out of it. We're not going to see a flood. We're just going to see some cooling and some moisture. So this would be a beneficial system whether or not it gets a name. Ironically, the deeper moisture is with the upper low down here in Cuba and the Keys, and this is where we've got a little bit better chance of flash flooding through the day today. Not like what we saw in Florida last week, but still going to be pretty moist. So our models are running here on 92L and kind of two different potential tracks. The first, taking it in towards Daytona. Don't get too carried away with this. We're not going to have much of a system by the time it gets into Georgia here over the weekend, but whatever's feature is dragging it in, it's going to be here in western Georgia. But there are also a couple of tracks that take it and turn it kind of right up the coast towards Georgia and South Carolina. And at that point, honestly, I don't think we're going to really have a system at that point. It's just going to be a remnant circulation with some clouds and maybe a few showers. So again, we'll talk about it here. We're probably going to talk about it tomorrow morning, maybe in Saturday morning's video, but really not a big deal at this point. Model guidance keeps it below tropical strength for the most part, and we're probably peaking this afternoon or evening. Here's a look at the NAM model, and you'll see the winds are going to pick up a little bit here at the coastline today, but more so tomorrow. As we get to about 11 a.m. tomorrow, winds start picking up here, 30 to maybe 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts potentially. And then you can see somewhat of a core trying to show up on the NAM model here near Jacksonville. Time frame on this would be 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. So that's when our system probably comes on shore. There's a small area of winds that may try to gust to 50 miles per hour. Sorry, this is the very tail of my screen here. I can't do much about zooming in or scrolling down, but I guess I could just scroll down, but then I lose my slider. But then this comes on shore in the afternoon, and there's really not much wind left. I mean, the NAM really holds on to this sucker here tomorrow night, but I don't think there's much wind. It may get breezy for a little bit of time in South Georgia here, but by the weekend, not much of a feature left. In fact, winds are going to be calm. It's just going to get hot again, and the humidity is going to sit here and climb. For rainfall totals, we're not expecting a whole lot across a widespread area. Again, the NAM model does show some concentration of maybe some heavier rain, and this would benefit you guys in North Florida, 2 to 4 inches. maybe 5 inches near St. Augustine, or is it St. Augustine? I'm not really sure. But either way, you're going to get some rain and you need it. But we're not going to see like what we're seeing in Texas yesterday, what we saw in South Florida last week, just very isolated areas here that we've got to watch. There'll be an uptick in moisture here along the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina, maybe up to an inch or two of rain. Most of that coming tomorrow into tomorrow night. But again, not a big deal at this point. All right, well, here's a look at our GFS model. We're going to look at the upper levels, and you can see our features in place here. We've got kind of this feature here, this trough, and then here's our upper level low, these two interacting. This is our system heading towards Florida. This upper low is heading into the Gulf. Here's our next wave of energy over Central America that has a chance to develop somewhere in this area. And then we've got another trough here, kind of a front linked up to an upper level low. But the big story on the map today and tomorrow is this large sprawling area of high pressure in place across the Mid-South and the Mid-Atlantic region. And it is starting to weaken across New England. We're going to see more active weather in New England as the hot air finally moves south of this region. But that can sometimes fuel things underneath of it. You can see the ridge doesn't really go away. What it does is it repositions itself over parts of the deep south here this weekend. And then as we head into next week, it does rebuild again to the north and east eventually. Not the first part of the week, but the second part of the week. Now, once that ridge settles back in, that's when things do open back up for potential development. You can see by next weekend, we've got this front hanging out here near Florida, and we've got features coming across the Atlantic from east to west. A little tough to see on this graphic, but what this means is while there's not anything super organized coming across, we've got to watch the tail end of this front again for something to try and form. And Florida would seem to be the place to watch here as we head towards the beginning of July. I don't want to get too carried away because that is still a couple of weeks away, but it is something if you're planning a trip over that holiday weekend that you just need to be mindful of. There may be something to keep an eye on here. So here's a look at our systems. Here's our next wave that moves in maybe as a depression or weak storm here on Sunday and Monday. Behind it, more moisture follows into the southeastern Caribbean. And then here's our front that hangs out. And you can see some spin-ups along the tail end of the front, another wave coming towards the Caribbean in early July. So we are definitely not done with the tropics, even though once we get past this feature here and once we get past Alberto and maybe our next system, Beryl, as we get into Monday, while there isn't going to be anything that lights up in the tropics, there will still be action to watch. In fact, the GFS model tries to spin something up off the southeast coast, not this weekend, but the following. It also tries to spin up something weak in the southwestern Gulf as well. So the pattern repeats itself not just once, but twice here in the Western Gulf, according to the latest run of the GFS. I'll be watching that to see if that trend continues. Right now, it's just one model, and it's a little too soon to make those calls. Let's take a look at severe weather, flooding, and heat across the United States. We have heat rebuilding in California, much of the Northeast, and especially New England, still under heat advisories and warnings. As we deal with some of our hottest weather in a couple of summers. Not way off the charts hot, but certainly hotter than what people are used to, especially across Maine and New Brunswick. The good news is that heat is going to let up. The bad news is that we are going to see some severe weather. We have flood potential over parts of the upper Midwest. New Mexico has been dealing with some floods in the burn areas. Now we've got a threat for moisture to move up and cause some flooding across Utah and western Colorado. And we still have a risk for some isolated brief tornadoes in South Texas here this morning. Here is a look at record temperatures, and you'll see, I can't slow this animation down. This is coolwx.com, but we saw record highs yesterday. That's what these reds are and these X's across New England. We also saw record lows across the West. The two kind of balanced each other out, and the country as a whole, despite how hot it is in the East and how cold it is in the West, has not been running super hot. Now, as we head into next week, I think that changes as we start to deal with a more gripping heat wave in the central part of the country that moves eastward. Here's a look at our upper level features. Generally speaking, we've got this trough in here. Here is Alberto moving inland into Mexico. Here is our feature off the East Coast. Here's our upper level low in here. And here's our big ridge, which is still pretty well intact here across the eastern United States, our big heat dome. But what's going to happen is these pieces of energy are going to ride up and over it, And with the heating of the day, we're going to see more action popping up in the same exact places today and tomorrow. And it's going to get old here by the weekend. Moderate risk for flooding, South Dakota, slight risk into Minnesota and Iowa, and a marginal risk across New England for today. Tomorrow, that area grows and shifts slowly eastward. We do have that threat for heavy rain as well in southern New England and in parts of the Northeast. And around the lakes here, as we get to this weekend, it's going to be pretty wet, especially Wisconsin and Michigan, but also parts of upstate New York. And that heavy rain shifts across Canada and into the St. Lawrence, into northern New England as we get to Sunday and Monday. So very active times here on the upper part of our ridge here. Severe weather risk today is slight. That's a level 2 out of 5. East of Buffalo to about Portland, Augusta, and Bangor, Maine. As we head towards Friday, a marginal risk, not going to be quite as busy, but still could be across some of the same areas. Here's our next system moving into Minnesota. Slight risk on Saturday across Wisconsin and surrounding states. Right now, no severe weather threat for Saturday in the Northeast, but as we get to Sunday, this is going to head in your direction and may get active again. Here's the NAM model real fast. I want to wrap this up for you guys. Action this afternoon and evening, then it falls apart. More action farther south tomorrow, and then a break. And then we're going to see things back across the Midwest where it's going to be very wet here. Here's a look at the Midwest. Showers and storms ramping up a bit as we get into the afternoon hours around Michigan and Illinois and Iowa, and then fading. And then another complex moves in tomorrow where we do have a better chance for severe weather across this region. And as we head towards the weekend, it all is going to advance eastward. Here's a look at the GFS real fast as we head into next week. Low pressure tracking through the Great Lakes, maybe a decent system across southeast Canada on Sunday, severe weather on the south and east of it. And then we see more storm complexes early next week gathering across the upper Midwest. And one of these could produce potentially a derecho or a stronger thunderstorm complex. Still too soon to make the call where, but somewhere in the lower Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley, we've got to be watching for that. And then it cools down here across the Northeast, a nice big area of high pressure. The south will stay hot, though, and that heat does bounce right back as we get towards the weekend leading up to the 4th. And we're going to have more storms to deal with as well. Temperature forecast, it is going to cool off here in the Northeast, but staying hot across the Mid-South, upper 90s and low 100s here as we get towards Saturday. And Sunday, that heat does bounce back. Very hot across the Mid-Atlantic. Triple digits from Richmond down to Macon here as we get to early next week. Look at the heat across Kansas and into North Texas. That is going to build to the east. The Southwest will be very hot. So next week, until that front comes through, we do have a chance of seeing record heat over Virginia, the Carolinas, maybe D.C., all the way down into the deep south here. That will break for a few days at the end of next week, and then we'll see that heat beginning to rebuild again as we get towards the 4th of July. Again, this could change because it's a few days out still, but what we're going to be watching. Severe weather potential as well. I need to wrap this up. Look at our Cape. This is our storm fuel. It's going to be climbing next week big time as we get to Monday across the upper Midwest, and then continuing Tuesday and Wednesday into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys and into the southeast towards the middle of next week. So we're definitely heading into an active time here. Excessive heat followed by severe weather, flooding potential in this area, and flash drought across the two areas in orange, which I talked about yesterday. More on that to come. I hope you all had a great Juneteenth yesterday. I hope you enjoy your summer solstice today. We're looking forward to the weekend. And as always, if you could become a subscriber, I would appreciate that. And also share with your friends. Please do. I know a lot of folks get impacted by the weather. My goal is to help you guys see the big picture, but also talk about the details when it matters the most. As always, I want to give all the thanks and all the credit and all the glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has blessed me in so many ways. It really is a blessing to be able to get on YouTube with you guys and share this. Not for my benefit, but hopefully for yours, but also to glorify God. Psalm 8, King James Version says, O Lord our God, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. And it's just wonderful to have that glory above the heavens and know that there is somebody out there who loves us so much that he has given us the gift of eternal life and grace and forgiveness of our sins if we accept Jesus as our Savior, which I did about 11 years ago. An amazing thing, despite all of the difficulties we face here in life, that we don't have to do all this battle here for nothing, that in the end, it's all worth it to us in that we're rewarded with the treasures in heaven. And that is the good news that I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll talk again here tomorrow. See ya.